Oh, hello. Welcome, y'all. Good evening, friends, enemies, lovers, and leeches. We're back. We are Apochromatic Unlimited, and all persons of color, cooperative of creators, working together to uplift the unheard voices of people of color in the tabletop role playing game space. I am your host, once again, the disembodied voice of Apochromatic Unlimited, Mark J. Tonight is going to be real quick, but really special. It's just a special presentation, a cast talk back with the absolute wonderful stars from a Halloween presentation of Jiangshi, Blood in the Banquet Hall. If you've never been to a cast talk back, it's usually an opportunity to ask any questions, hear from the cast, just connect with the presentation beyond what you saw. Just get an idea of how the individuals who presented the game felt about everything. So, having said that, I'd like to introduce our cast. If you'd be so kind, first, Banana.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. My name is Banana. My pronouns are she, they, and he, and I am one of the co-designers of Jiangshi Blood in the Banquet Hall alongside Sanfeng Lim, who's not here today, but I'm sure he's probably watching. I don't know. Maybe he's not. He's probably busy doing Sunday things. But I also have a whole bunch of different projects I'm working on currently, including Demos Academy, which is being shipped out right now, Forgery, another horror solo RPG that's also being shipped out right now, and I'm also in the process of working on a few other solo games, such as Knockoff, which is a sequel to Forgery, and The Darkness at the Brink of Ohio, also a solo game. So, yeah. I'm going to pass it along to the next person.
That's me. I remember the order this time. Hi, I'm Agatha. My pronouns are she, her. Um, I'm so, I'm so excited about all these solo games, first of all, that are coming out. And they look so good too. Y'all should check it out. If only to look at the cover and then get sucked in and then play the games. But I am a co-host, one of the co-hosts of the Asians Represent podcast, where we talk about media, but mostly gaming from an Asian perspective. We kind of branch out sometimes. We've been doing a lot more anime stuff recently over the past year. But yeah, if you are interested in checking us out, you can find us on YouTube. Just search up Asians Represent, or anywhere that you find podcasts. So any podcatcher. I'm also a cultural consultant and now a game designer. I'm writing one of the islands for the stretch goals for Deathmatch Island, which just finished its Kickstarter run, so that's exciting. Check that out if you want to um, play a game where you're fighting for your life in a game show a la Squid Game with your friends. So yeah, there's that, and then the other things that I'm writing are you can find on itch.io with my username Mighty Shrimp. That's Mighty Shrimp, all squished in one. And you can also find me on Blue Sky with that handle. And that's me. I'll pass it on to the next person.
It's me. Hi, everyone. I'm Kiana. My pronouns are she and they. I am a TTRPG writer, designer, somewhat retired streamer, and co-creator of the TTRPG Safety Toolkit. I do a lot of writing for a lot of different things. You'll probably see my name pop up just in credits across different products, including Jiangshi. I got to write some of the location stuff and also one of the adventures. And a bunch of other stuff too. But yeah, I'm mostly just I haven't been from the camera. Like this one shot had been the first one shot in a very long time that I played the game, and I was just like, hello, I must put the streamer hat back on to figure out how to perform in front of a camera again. And it's very fun to play, and it's going to be very fun to chat with everybody. You can find me as at Kiana S. Basically everywhere. That's the handle I go by. If you want me to find Itchy on Twitter, on Blue Sky, wherever, it's Kiana S. That's where you're gonna find me. And I pass it on to Kane.
It's me, Connie. I'm going to do something very funny right now, which is zoom in on my face a few times. So there's less of my ambient room that you see. But hello, friends. Connie, pronounced the he, she. I was the GM for this Jiangshi Blood of the Banquet Hall one shot. And beyond that, I am the game master and creative producer for Transplanar RPG, which you may or may not know is an all transgender, people of color led, dark fantasy actor play show telling stories set in an original, non colonial, anti Orientalist multiverse. We just wrapped arc 1 of the Chaos Protocol, which is our current main campaign, literally yesterday, because today's a Sunday, right? Yeah, so yesterday's Saturday night. I'm still like kind of, running off of the high of that. The Chaos Protocol is our current main campaign. It follows 3 doomed agents of the Transplanar Reification and Nourishment Syndicate, or TRANS, as they answer distress calls across the multiverse and untangle a planes-spanning dark mystery. It is a show about revolution, vengeance, and grief, and it's a serious and poetic long-term campaign, and we're just getting started, so now's a great time to hop right in. If you like stories with dark and serious themes, a very dramatic approach to storytelling, and a very narrative and character-focused game, which is kind of just my style of facilitation in general, but I'm sure we're all going to get to like talk about our experiences playing and also what it was like to be facilitated, and also for myself as a facilitator, what it was like to run Jiangshi. I've got my old session notes open right now, as well as our like session 0 sheet that we put together asynchronously before the one shot. So I'm like ready to dive right in.
I love it. Would y'all be so kind to introduce your characters as well? And just kind of what it was like to inhabit those characters as you went through the game. It was really.
Do I remember my character's name? No. My brain has lost that information somewhere.
Singa is the name I got.
Yeah, in the 3 weeks since we played, my brain is like, we don't need this anymore. No.
I feel the same way. I'm just like, where did I put that character?
I got you.
I'll put it in the group chat. Oh yeah, Agatha did it.
There we go. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. As soon as you said that, I was like frantically scrolling through the chat. Like, oh, get that dog.
Remembering names in this economy?
I know, right?
Oh yeah, of course. We played these characters. Totally remember this.
Oh my gosh, how could we have forgotten Wington? I could have forgotten my own character's name, but not him.
Listen, I forgot too. It's all good. Should I go first or
okay, go for it, Banana.
Yeah. Go for it.
All right, we'll go in order again. Cool. I was playing Tong Wing-tun, and he is the annoying older brother of Singha, and yeah, he's just kind of all over the place, kind of keeps getting people into trouble, specifically the family in trouble, and even though he owns the Golden Palace, our restaurant, I think we all know who actually runs the place, so yeah.
Okay, I was gonna be like, speaking of, well, it's not me. I'm playing Gamhong, pronouns he, him, and he's like the second child, I think. If we're going by like age, maybe. Is that right? Or am I oldest?
Yeah, I think
no.
Singha is the youngest.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. So, yeah. Gamhong is the second oldest of this adopted sibling kind of dynamic that we have going on. He's very, very quiet, and will do all the work in the back, whether told to or not. Is always trying to help Wington get away with things. Also, allegedly, a martial arts master, but he's very reluctant to show that off.
Yeah, and I played the youngest of the 3, Young Singha, who was the responsible one the bravery, but the very like treating everything very seriously. Everything had to go correctly. Having to cover up for her brothers with the what is the equivalent of the mob essentially here is the toys would be like, yeah, no, there's everything perfectly fine. Don't worry about them. Uh, and yeah, it was very fun to play. Basically, we had Wing Chun, and then we had if we're talking about straight man, funny man, we had Wing Chun be funny man, and we had the other two very different kinds of straight man in the dynamic, and it was very fun, especially because Shanghai they would not put up with anything from the other two, including, hey, I'm gonna go do something dangerous. Shanghai's like, no, you're not doing that by yourself. That's silly. No. Incorrect.
No, we're gonna do something dangerous together.
Together.
As a family. That's what that means. And I played everyone else. Various names that I have mostly forgotten, but I do have on my sheet here. Who could forget Lao Lao? Who could forget Lao Lao? The mob boss, and Lewis. English name Lewis.
The redemption,
Chinese name too. Boo.
The redemption arc on Lewis at the end there, I was kind of in tears a little bit. I'm curious, y'all, what was the vibe going into this game for y'all? Again, wasn't super last minute, but it was a short period of getting everything together. And what was the vibe going into it? Yeah.
I can go ahead, Kiana.
Yeah, I mean, I was mostly just like excited because one, I haven't been able to play this game. I've had it on my shelf for years, and I hadn't been able to play it before. And then like I have my fabulous other three cast members are amazing people, and we've been kind of in each other's circles for also years. I've played with Agatha before, and Banana, but I hadn't had the chance with Connie. But Connie and I have done other stuff together. And so it's just kind of this like, kind of like finally I got to be with all these people and do a cool thing together, playing a game that I've been wanting to do for a while. And so like all those things were pretty last minute in terms of prep and stuff. I think we were all pretty like chill. We trust each other on like going into stuff, and so I wasn't super stressed. I'm like, okay, I have a basic concept of what my character is and what everyone else's character and roles are going to be. Let's go. And I think it's a good environment to be in. And, you know, everything turned out wonderfully at the end. People were really, really into the characters and the story and stuff. So it turned out to be a good time. But yeah, going in, it was mostly surprisingly just like comfortable. And part of it also, too, is that like we are all Chinese diaspora in some way, and so that kind of like entering into that space with a game that centered around that experience kind of opened up a little bit of that comfort level too, in a way that would not have worked the same way if I was entering into this game with other people who didn't have that kind of shared experience in some way. So like we all have different experiences with our diaspora identities and stuff, but we all had that kind of baseline, and it meant that we could lead into a lot of very specific details that we just were able to kind of like all be like, oh yeah, we absolutely know this, what Lao Lao is like, because we know this Asian auntie who is very serious and will, but also in the same term will be like, come sit down, like, have you eaten yet? Like, we have this kind of shared thing, so that was cool, and I think that kind of really carried throughout the whole game, and like kind of all the experience we've had together leading up to it.
Awesome. Any other thoughts?
I
I'd
was
love
just
to hear
happy
from
to.
Agatha and or Banana as players, because I have thoughts as a facilitator, but I want to hear from players first.
I was just happy to not facilitate the game and not GM. Because I've run Joshes so many times. I'm just like, I would love it if someone else, Connie, could run it. And yeah, I think Connie did an incredible job. I'm just like really happy that I got to be a player and experience it as a player versus like GMing. So yeah, thank you for that.
If I could interject real quick, yeah, we did initially approach Banana to run because we were just like, Banana has a game, and they are maybe they can run, and Banana's like, I will only play, and we're like, respect, respect, we got you, okay. So then we're so thankful to have Connie run this game for us.
Yeah. If you're the designer of the game, you're allowed to be like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that so much. Like that's like the biggest gift you can give a game designer is to run their game for them and have them in the game.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Okay, I can also speak a bit of my thoughts. Yeah, I think I was also very comfortable going into it. I played I played in a game of Jiangshi that Banana facilitated before. So I had like a vague impression. It was like quite a while ago though, so I was like, yeah, I kind of remember what it was like. And then yeah, I played with Connie. I played with Ken. Oh, I played with everyone. So I was like, yeah, it's good. And I think what Kiana said was it definitely factored into the comfort level for me as well, which is that I knew, yeah, we all had some kind of Chinese diaspora background, and it's like basically like the parts where you're like unsure of in the game, like the mechanics and stuff, we can kind of just like fall back on tropes and like cultural understanding to kind of like fill out the roleplay and the story. I feel like that was one of the things that it's like if you have one or the other, that is always really helpful. Like you either have like system mastery or you have like genre and trope understanding. And or I guess this isn't necessarily genre. Like well kind of like the Happy Vampire films, but also like cultural understanding to fall back on. So I was like kind of like, yeah, I think we'll figure things out at the table. Because yeah, we also didn't get like a session 0 session. And that was interesting. I was like, oh, will we be okay? But then I was like, nah, it's fine. And it was fine. Also, I knew that Connie was gonna like just like do some like GM magic. Because I've seen Connie GM before. So I'm like, yeah, they know what's up. I'm not worried.
Yeah. My preference is almost always to like have an in-person, video call session 0 if at all possible. But just given how schedules were shaking out, it just didn't seem like it was like physically possible for us to all like align our schedules. So I did what I do for an asynchronous one-shot session 0 situation, and what I do for just like session 0s, even if we do have like an in-person meeting to supplement it, is I put together a session 0 sheet. So the sheet includes information about like characters for like mechanical things like care gen, like filling out a character sheet, but also stuff about the world as well as safety tools. And I always like to add, especially if it's a system that's newer to myself, if I've never run it before, or if I know that some players have never played it before, I like to add like a quick reference area that folks can like thumb to during the game itself. So for me, the process of starting this game was starting with that session 0 sheet, right? Digging through the text of Jiangshi and putting together the sheet. Also in conversation with some of the preliminary themes that we in our group chat had discussed that we were interested in exploring. Because this game explicitly deals with racism, xenophobia, immigration, all of that stuff, it was important to me that safety was kind of like at the forefront. I wanted to very early on get a gauge for like how like explicit do we want to get with the explorations of racism, right? So I think like one of the first things I asked when like collecting information was about lines and veils from the cast, and we figured out collectively like, okay, we're okay touching on themes of racism if it's not like XYZ. Like let's not have NPCs throw around slurs, right? But like maybe like a microaggressive moment here or there where like players get to have a lot of agency around how they respond to those situations would be okay, right? And I as a Chinese GM playing the racist white people. Like I was also, when it was actually happening with the character of like the land development guy, like I was very careful with like not having him be super explicit, but also portraying him pretty explicitly as a douchebag. That's also another ethos of mine that I've spoken about on I think Apochromatic Unlimited's one of your podcast channels, about how I think, and this might be kind of like a hot take, but this is what I think, and this was my approach when facilitating Jiangshi, that if you try to portray a racist villain or like a straight up bigoted antagonist in your games as complex or nuanced in some way, shape, or form, I think that's unethical. I think you can do it, and I think it can be done well. But I think it's genuinely unethical, because what you end up doing is cultivating sympathy for like a Nazi or a racist, right? And we see this all the time. We see it done, I think, unsuccessfully in The Boys, Zootopia, Bright, constantly done very poorly, I think. That's why you'll have people who are like media not very good at critically consuming or interacting with media being like, OMG, Homelander was right, or like, I love Homelander, and I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? But it's because the writers made him complex and nuanced, even though he's like a, you know, like a white supremacist. So that was important to me not to do here. Like this land developer guy, I was literally typing in the group chat like, hey, if you guys want to kill him or like leave him to be eaten by the zombies, that's like totally your decision, and I will be like 100% cool with that. But what we ended up doing was like honestly also a really profound and moving choice, was to like save him from the Jiangshi, right? But like that's it, right? Like that's, you know, because it reflects less on him and his worthiness as a person and more on the characters that chose to save him, right? So it reflected very well, I think, on Gamhung, who like pulled him out of that, like I think it was Gamhung who pulled. No, was he left to die? Am I thinking of Lewis? Am I misremembering what happened?
No,
we saved Lewis for sure.
Gamhung brought him along, and then
yes. And then punch him in the face,
and then
right? And then one of you punch him in the face.
You punch him. We saved both of them, and Calhoun just fucking knocked him out.
Just socked him, right? So I think what I really loved about that character decision from like all three of you actually as an ensemble was like, yes, you'll save this shitty white guy's life, like not because he's worthy of redemption or whatever, but because to me it felt like that's just who you are as people. You're good people. Right? Like, and that's what you'll do, you know? But then you also punch him in the face because he's racist, right? And what he does with his second chance is completely up to him, you know? And if he chooses to, right, keep being a dick, then he'll reap what he sows.
I think specifically Gamhung's motivation for that was not necessarily because he was racist. I think this is one thing, maybe we were gonna get into anyway, about like the way that different characters, also of different generations, kind of view racism. Where Gamhung is like, he expects it and he accepts it. That like this is like, it's a part of the price that you pay to like make your way in a foreign land, and also to like pay for to like be able to send money back like to your family. That's the kind of thing that is like he's okay with it. Like it's not his favorite thing, you know? But I think he's kind of like, he expects to be treated like poorly. And he's not like, I don't think he doesn't expect to be treated as an equal. But why he punched that guy in was because that guy like went like one step too far. And that step was like destroying the graves. Like that is not okay. And it's not necessarily like, even if there were other people that were like worse than him to Gamhung would be okay with it if it didn't have to do with like actually like destroying gravesites, like disturbing the ancestors and like making them into monsters. Like that's like, I think that was the motivation specifically. And I feel like like I really like being able to play like a first generation immigrant, because like this actually reminds me of like a conversation I had with my mom, where I was like growing up, I always felt like extra sensitive to people being racist towards my mom. Also because she still has an accent, always did, and then like it's just there's just various factors, right? And then like growing up, I was the one that would like translate for her a lot, and then like many many kids. But it was always like, it always felt so much worse because like it was a mixture of like, I felt like ashamed of her because I was being taught to be ashamed of it. But at the same time, I also like really resented that I was being made to feel ashamed. So like it was always just like a horrible feeling. And I remember once I had a conversation with my mom about it, where I was like, that's what bothers me the most. And she was like, oh, like, why is that such a big deal?
Classic response. Fucking classic. This, I remember, like, I'm shaking hands with you right now, Agatha. No, I'm shaking hands with you right now. I remember, that's making me think of two things. One is when my mom still worked at this, like, health insurance company as, like, a data person, she was specifically passed over for a promotion because her boss was like, oh, she doesn't really have, like, the English language skills and people skills needed. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, because my mom does speak with a little bit of an accent, but she's completely fluent in English. And her role is data entry. It does not require, like, no, it's literally very, like, it's just, and even, it wasn't for a managerial position either, where she would have to manage people, like, and so the reason was completely just racist and bullshit. And my sister, and this happened when we were in high school, my sister in particular got really mad about it, and she was like, oh my god, you should like take this to HR, like this is messed up. But like my mom was like, she was like, it's not worth it, like I'm still making like the money, it's still fine, I don't want to raise up a stink, like. And I think that's kind of also a lot of the attitude you'll find in like my mom's generation of like immigrants, is like the idea of like, don't cause a ripple, like don't raise a stink, right? Like just go with the flow, don't stick your head out, right? Because that might jeopardize the position that you're in, which I think, at least my generation, like I have a very different approach to that, because I see raising a stink as necessary for survival and solidarity with other oppressed peoples of the imperialist core that we are in, as someone who is in America, or if you're in Canada. The other thing that your story made me think of, Agatha, is I remember, and this is like such like a hashtag diaspora child moment. I remember when I was like maybe 11 or 12, and my grandma in particular, like we would argue all the time because we're both Aries, right? Like my grandma would like, my Lala, she'd be like, you're so lazy, right? Like classic, grandma scolding moments. And it would get really heated. And I would remember praying and wishing that I couldn't understand Chinese, so that like what she was saying couldn't hurt me, because she could only speak in Chinese, she could only speak in Mandarin, right? And being like, oh my god, like I wish I like didn't know what she was saying, which I think is like genuinely such a sad thing to pray for as a child, and such a sad thing to wish, that I like no longer feel that way, even if I am in conflict with my grandma. But yeah, I think there's something about living in America as a Chinese American person that kind of forces you to choose between aspects of your identity. And it took me a moment in my journey of personal growth to realize that the choice is fake. I don't have to choose. And the people and the pressures forcing me to choose are the things that should change instead of myself. And it's like a big, and it's in conversation with my queerness and with my transness as well. Like this idea that I shouldn't have to compromise who I am in order to like live in freedom and like live in like a fully realized version of myself, right? It's like the systems around me that are intrinsically deeply cruel instead of myself.
Yeah. That makes me think that maybe one of the big differences between our generations, I think like the first generation that probably immigrated here, was that, they didn't really have a community. They had to build that community or find that community. And because they're so isolated, one of the reasons why they are scared of standing up for themselves or scared of like, saying anything, is because of that risk. Like if you're isolated, you are taking on a lot of risk, because who's gonna look out for you if you're just doing it by yourself, versus like second generation, third generation, you are planting your roots here, you have a family, you have like friends, you have a community that you can depend upon. And so if anything were to happen, you can always go back to your community and sort of like sort of like if say for example, like, you know, you lost your job or something like that, you would be able to build from something versus, like, you know, if you're first generation, you don't really have anything. Maybe that's where some of the fear is from, because it's just like, you know, what else do you have? Like, if I lose my job today, I don't have any friends that I can go to. I don't have any family members to go to and say, like, hey, like, you know, I need some help. Instead, it's just like, this is the only thing that I know. And that's sort of probably where some of that comes from.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because like we spent a lot of our time when we were creating the world of our game and stuff, specifically building a community for our characters to exist in. Um, you know, we were playing a found family, like an adopted family, not blood related, but they were family nonetheless. And you know, they were very tied in with their neighborhood in Chinatown. Like they were the neighborhood lunch spot. Um, and also with the Tongs, they were heavily involved with that, which like again, depending on which Tong you're looking at, if essentially be involved with the mafia. Uh, but at the same time, there was still that sense of like you had that community there, you had those people there to go to, like Singha when dealing with the land developer in the restaurant and like talking to him and like trying to like her default is to like I don't want to cut too big of a ruckus here because this is our home, a place of business. But she immediately went to Lao Lao, to the elder in her community to be like, hey, this just happened. I would like your advice and your thoughts on this. Um, and so it's just something that sticks out to me about our game specifically is that we were like, you know, no, we wanted to focus ourselves as a place and people in a community. And I think that really shines too with what Connie did with the story and the plot, like that the community was in peril, that it was it was the idea was the threat was not necessarily the zombies were a symptom, that it was the threat of a white person coming in and taking away your home, and taking away your people, and tying community not just with the people but also with the spaces you exist in and that you claim for yourself. So
yeah, I also, one thing that kind of goes back to like it's nice to play this game. I mean it's nice to play this game in general, but like in our case, it was nice to play with all, um, specifically like with like Chinese diaspora background. But I think probably with other like probably like people of color, it would work as well. But it's like there's also in the back of our head always this understanding that there is the threat of violence, and that like being oppressed in this case is not just like, oh yeah, like I could lose my home, which is true, but also I I could, like, if I did too much, if I protested too much, if I went out of line of what is acceptable, like there could be violent consequences. And I feel like this is the kind of thing that is sometimes harder to kind of get as the context or with a table in a game, when it's like I like the way that we were role playing, it was definitely like we were all like, yeah, like even like Winston would like, you know, trying to cook, being confident in that, setting the kitchen on fire, like all of this is still within the space that we occupy and that we are allowed in. And I feel like that, but like never like just being like, oh, let's just like take it to their, I don't know, their office and like stick it to them, you know? Like that's not how we were thinking about it, because we were thinking in the realistic space and the threat of violence that is always there, and knowing that we're not powerful enough to like counter that systemic violence. And I feel like that made the game a lot richer, is that understanding and then playing within that, instead of it just being kind of this like whatever kind of power fantasy, which is also very good in other cases. But I feel like this like really rooted us, and it made me feel more comfortable because it was like that's how it was, and in many cases that's how it is. And I'm happy to be able to tell a story within that specific context without almost like whitewashing it. Yeah, so that's one part that I really enjoyed. Is being scared.
The power fantasy was not the typical white idea of a power fantasy, which is just the I can do whatever. And,
yeah.
We can take down the system. Right, that wasn't the power fantasy here in this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this also goes into a conversation about tone, which is another thing we brought up pretty early on during our like asynchronous session 0 process, which was the text itself was very clear that even though the themes are heavy, there is a world in which you could play Jiangshi really goofy, like very focusing on like the comedy of it, like the action hero, like kind of kung fu classics situation. And one of the questions in the session 0 sheet that I set up was like, what is your desire for the tone of this one shot? Like, and I'm open to whatever. And I was seeing that like there was a nice range between Banana, Kiana, and Agatha, but there was like also a desire to move away from pure farce. Like a desire to genuinely grapple with the core themes of the game, which is about racism and community and family, however you define it. As well as like standing together, as well as like horror themes, because it's a fantastical game. There are monsters here, right? So that was important to me when prepping the session as well, like to go along with the tone that the players wanted and to stay away from the tone that they did not want. Part of the design around having the land developer is big thing be to desecrate the graves. Like he was trying to plow them up so he could like make the land usable for development, right? Like remove the corpses that were there. Was again to have that be a really clear and direct way of him threatening the community. He was literally trying to remove the bodies of ancestors and elders, right? And he was very specifically going from like door to door, from individual to individual, trying to like find a weak spot, right? Try to find that one family, find that one individual that would sell, right? And that would like, and this idea of like a link breaks, right? But the chain holds. So I think that was very clear in how the players responded to the thread as well, right? All three of you going, and it was gonna be originally there was a version of this, which is why potential child endangerment was a content warning, where like the teens were gonna be like Stranger Things teens and like go out to the graveyard and investigate the noises and then get like endangered by the Jiangshi and the bulldozer. But I'm really glad that the PCs ended up being like, no, we'll step in and we'll help, right? As like a moment of like helping out the community as well. So there we saw like various generations. We saw your generation. You were all roughly in the same generation, like 30s, right? Year old. And then we saw like Lala's generation. Lewis was in your generation, I would say. And then the younger generation after you, like the teens. There is a generation, like I guess in their 20s that we didn't get to see as much. But I did have some NPCs prepared, and this is also just the constraints of a one-shot, like not being able to explore all the little details I was able to prep, but that's kind of like just part of the form, right? I was not expecting to get to explore every single thing that I had teed up, but I teed up various characters and subplots just in case we had extra time. But I also learned through trial and error, through many years of experience, to not plan too much, because then I'm going to be really sad about not getting to do stuff that I planned.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, big props to that specific plot point of like the land development, and then also like making the land usable. That's such a like perfect like imperialist instinct, right? That is the thing. That is the imperialist instinct, is this like justification through like rationalism and like enlightenment of like making land productive, taking land that was not producing and making it work for you. That's so like, this really was perfect. I also felt like he wasn't as like like horrible in other ways than I was expecting. I was like ready. I was like, like I I have my armor. I'm ready to like encounter like really intense racism. And I thought you pulled back. And I feel like um and I could feel your care in doing that. I can tell that it was a very deliberate attempt. And I did appreciate that. Because also ultimately, like it like he still did the most horrible thing. Like he didn't humiliate me at my face, but he humiliated me by destroying like our basically what like the spiritual aspect of our identity, which is definitely worse. So I would liked I like that it went so hard with that specific aspect.
I think going off of what you were saying, Agatha, I think like it sort of feels more real, right? That like a character or a villain would say something that's not terrible. They wouldn't like, say anything that's like too bad, but then they would go around behind your back and like do a terrible thing. Like I feel like that's very much like something that would happen in real life where we see and as an example like in Vampires versus the Bronx where it's like similar situation excuse me where land developer is like sweet talking like I forget, was it like a nail salon owner or something like that in like the very beginning scene, and like they're doing their sweet talking and it's like, oh okay, this deal sounds great, like this sounds like an awesome opportunity, but then the ramifications of that afterwards are just like you're basically threatening like everyone's home and everyone's like livelihood. And so it's interesting because it does feel very, even if it's like facade wise, it's like they're trying to be like one way, uh behind the scenes it's like a totally different thing. And yeah, that really resonated with me for sure.
Yeah, it was important to me to because there is a version of this where I could have been like super racist, like where I could have been extremely explicit. I could have brought in cops. I could, like, but I'm just like, I would much rather err on the side of caution than kind of go in too hard, especially because we hadn't done like an in-person session 0. I was like, you know what? Like, let's be careful about this. Like, I trust all of us, and I've worked with all of you in some way, shape, or form. Now this is an all Chinese table, but I'm like not trying to re-traumatize us by doing that. I also, there's a part of me that wonders how effective it would have been narratively too. Like, is it truly emotionally impactful to like sling slurs and portray violence and like do all these terrible things? Or is it more effective to have it be a bit more subtle and have like the fantastical elements of it tell a story through metaphor, allegory, and, imagination, and like what he was doing, let's not mince words, it was extremely racist, very colonialist too, like tearing up the graves. That's grave desecration. That's really racist. That is extreme. Like, it's really vile and very cruel. So like, but it's less explicitly, like a sudden gut punch, like a slur or like a racist gesture might do. And that's just also kind of my approach as a storyteller as well. Like at the beginning of this, I gave a little spiel about, the Translator RPG, which is the channel I run, being non-colonial and anti-Orientalist. And like kind of what that means is racism. This is why Jiangshi was different for me as well too, because in the other kinds of games I run, racism, sexism, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia, colonialism, and imperialism are just not subjects we deal with. Like they're all on our like channel-wide lines. Like we just don't do it, right? So like the conflict comes from other places, right? Like notably, classism is not on our lines or Rails list. So we do sometimes talk about economic inequities and whatnot. And there are, of course, allegories that you could draw, metaphors that you could, if you're reading between the lines, but it's never textual, it's always subtextual. So running Jiangshi, I knew was going to be kind of like a different pulse than what I usually do. And even the kind of microaggressions I did was like, that's pretty out there for me. Like Connie Chong GM experience, like I never do that. like even on a microaggressive level. So I was honestly even pushing myself to be microaggressive, and I was even during break I was like, is this too much? Like there was, even though it wasn't, right? Like I was like, oh my god, am I like going too far? Because I really don't like playing bigoted characters, because I think it's late, like I think it's unimaginative. I think as a GM, if the only villains you can pull from your like pool of like characters you can do are bigots, I think it says a lot about your lack of imagination. So I think like just as like a creative exercise, I prefer not to do that, because I like portraying flawed villains. And I don't think, and again, this goes back to what I was saying originally, I don't think you could play a flawed racist without being unethical about it. Like I just don't. Maybe you could pitch something to me. Maybe you could try. You could try to convince me otherwise, but I don't think you will. That's kind of where I'm at. Which is why Walgren was kind of a one-note character, is because he's racist. And I was like, I don't want to spend any time fleshing him out or making him complex, right?
I think it's okay to have like caricatures of racist people. Like I feel like that's basically, you know, when we were designing this game, like we wanted to make sure that a lot of if we were going to touch on racism, like there was a section that we worked with James Mendez-Hodes on, where we were trying to talk about, like, you know, how can we make this so that when players touch this game, they understand that this is going to be like a caricature that they're portraying, and not like, you know, someone that's gonna sling around like any slurs or anything like that. He actually did that whole suggestion, like James Mendez-Hodes, he like actually put in that suggestion, because initially when we were designing this game, we just like didn't think about it. Like we were just like, this is a game that's for like Chinese diaspora. Like we weren't thinking initially like there's gonna be a lot of racism. But then he was just like, actually, like this is the 1920s, it's probably going to deal with it a lot. Like, how do we approach that? And I thought his work was really good, like the way that he approached it, because he comes from like a cultural sensitivity or like a sensitivity reading sort of background. So it's like, if either Sen or I were to like design this game without him, it would be harder just to like see all the different spots that we were missing out on. And so, yeah, I thought that was really interesting, like working with him about it, on it.
Yeah. And I wanted to add on just what you were saying, Connie, about like playing this character and how it was hard for you. I think like now I feel a little bit bad. Because I do need to make a disclaimer, which is that I feel like sometimes I'm a bit of a masochist as a player, which is like sometimes I'm like, oh, if I'm gonna make a character, like if I've set out to have a character like have a bad time, then I'm like, I want it. make me miserable, make them miserable, and then like I'm excited about it, and like because I play so many like GM-less games, like I can just make it happen. I just make bad things happen to my own character, and then because I know my own comfort limit, I can just like go as hard as I want, basically. But I do think that it's also so important that like, because the GM is also a player, that your safety is also really important. That, and like I hope that you basically stayed within whatever you were still comfortable with, because like playing a bad person, it can cause really bad bleed. Like you can feel really horrible afterwards. So, and I feel like sometimes like as a GM, like sometimes I would feel like I compelled to do it because that's kind of like the service I'm providing, I guess. So it's also like, just because a player, for example, like me, who's like, ooh, be horrible to me, I'm ready. It doesn't mean that the GM then needs to like give it, because again, everyone should be having fun. So I hope ultimately that you were also okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely like I was just during break I was like, woo, okay, yeah, I usually don't play characters like that. But I would consider myself someone who's pretty attuned to my emotional boundaries. And if something had happened where I was like, okay, this is actually too much for me, I would have communicated that for sure. And I appreciate your checking in, Agatha. Yeah. Safety is like tantamount. Safety is so important to being able to do the work I want to do, especially as someone who dabbles in dark fantasy and more serious and heavy themes. It's always at the forefront of my mind. So part of what that means for me as someone who champions safety and who takes safety very seriously is that, I mean, I think safety tools are only as good as how you implement them and whether or not you actually use them. So I'm always like if I were uncomfortable to the point where I didn't want to do it anymore, I would have said so. So like this is more of like a deep delve into my like deeper emotional state, which has nothing to do with like whether or not I was like pushing myself beyond my own boundaries, right? It was still very much within them. I was just like, whoa, okay, this is different and new. But yeah, again, I appreciate the care with which you checked in about that.
Me softly be like, yes, safety tools. Yes. Yeah, no, it was very good, and I think we were able to handle a lot of that serious stuff within our comfort level, kind of safety stuff, and also because again, we're in that unique experience where we're all different types of Chinese diaspora. We'll also have a bunch of other marginalizations that overlap with each other as well. And so this is kind of, I don't know, we can play the game with whoever you want, but there is something very special and unique about having that shared background and stuff, and having that kind of like set, like, okay, yeah, we don't even need to talk about some of this. We need to talk about our safety stuff, but we don't need to talk about like what does it mean for a Chinese restaurant to have these dishes? Like, what does it mean for familial relationships and respect and all that stuff? Like, that's all stuff we kind of already know. We just kind of roll with it.
Mm-hmm. And part of what made this game so special for me in particular as well is I'm a strong believer in the power of TTRPGs, especially as like a queer and trans person, as like a playground for radical imagination, right? For like building things that don't exist yet in the real world that we want to strive toward, whether it's how we resolve conflict with each other, how we form intimate relationships, how we create institutions, how we create communities that are able to hold each other, right? So for me, the portrayal of the Tongs, I know Tongs are essentially like they're a crime group, right? They're like the mafia, right? But I think my depiction of it was it wasn't rooted in any actual historical research I did. It was based on vibes alone. But that's also the creative liberty that I get to take as a GM, right? That's like part of the joy of GMing. And it was important to me to depict the Tongs as kind of like the community protectors that would protect Chinatown in the absence of white police, forces who are not there to actually protect. Cops don't actually protect and serve. Spoiler, right? So it was important to me that like also the head of the Tongs in this world was like a woman, like an older woman, and that it was like kind of like her younger male son who was kind of trying to, sell out essentially and like go the capitalist route, right? And like not respect the kind of work that his family had historically been doing. So that was an act of radical imagination for myself as well, right? And also, of course, I like imagine it because I imagine it is real. Lau being queer in some way, like 100%. She discovered her queerness later in life, right? So yeah, just sprinkling that in as well.
Though historically, there are some parallels that were pretty accurate in terms of like how the Tongs were initially sort of this group that was, trying to form a community, trying to protect the community. So that portion was actually really accurate. Later on, younger generations would branch off and try to form like crime syndicates, but that was kind of on like the younger generations that were trying to do that. So I feel like there were a lot of like historical parallels there.
And also, what is crime but a response to poverty, right? What is crime but a response to poverty and institutionalized racism, right? Let's think about it. Anyway.
But yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. I had so much fun. I love these characters. I love this little trio. I feel like I'm just like, they're gonna get up to so many more shenanigans, willingly or not.
Yeah, this trio was awesome. Very much like a found family with such a fascinating dynamic. The silent guy in the corner who will kick your ass. The youngest sibling with eldest sibling energy. And then there's Wing Chun.
He's here too.
He's there, yeah. He's the heart of the trio. Listen, he's the heart of the trio.
Not very good cook, but you know, if you need a fire, he's
If
there.
you need a fire, he got you.
If you need a fire to not be put out.
Yeah, no, it was truly the moment where Banana, I saw the realization in your eyes when Connie was like, "Oh, are you putting water on this fire?" You could see it in your brain go, "That's a bad idea. That's a thing that you're not supposed to do." And going with it anyways, and I feel like, "Yep, this is what
Wing Chun would do it.
Yeah, that's what our boy would do."
And it was beautiful. And all you had to do was get like 4 15-year-olds to clean up your mess.
Oh, that was my other favorite thing. Was like the really competent and like friendly teens. I feel like that's not a thing I ever see. So it was just like, but it also feels like it makes sense. Like teens are kind of like adults, like at this time, in a way.
I was
But
very
they
much
also,
like. Sorry, go ahead. Finish your thought, please.
oh, but they also felt very familial, in the
Yeah,
way
okay.
that everyone was interacting.
Community, right? The community is built of all these people from all different walks of life, but ultimately all wanting the best for each other. And like, you know, we saw that in like the gambling parlor aunties that came in and were like, "We're drunk."
Yeah, and
Right.
that's what was at stake. That's what would have been torn apart if
Yeah.
Marty was allowed to develop this, quote unquote, develop this land.
Yeah. And so I think that's at the end of the day, that's what made this like really sing, which is like being able to have that community, build that in, and then put that in peril, and then have us thwart it and punch a racist in the face. Like
Yes.
I don't know. Feels like the best ending.
Honestly, I think the best ending would have been, and this is just me being biased, the Jiangshi eating Marty alive. Dragging him into the depth of hell and eating him alive.
I'd be like,
That's an
all right.
AU ending.
Just be like, all right, see you later, bud. We're out.
Fuck out of there. Yeah.
I feel like that's like after credit scene. Like
Yeah.
goes back to
Yeah,
the
we
first
punch
set.
him.
He goes back to keep doing it. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
And then
three of us
Jiangshi-
like
yeah.
walking back, like with the sunrise in front of us, and then it's like, and then just like the whole like the Chinatown is like waking up, and we're all like, yeah, what are we gonna eat today? And then the background just like vague sounds of like flesh,
Screaming.
yeah, screaming, and then like flesh, or like life essence being drawn out.
That's now canon. I'm smacking my vitamin water,
Yep.
my GM vitamin water. Bam. That's canon.
I think there would be a post credit scenes where the next day after that, basically a clone of Marty would show up and try the same thing.
His
all over
twin
again.
brother,
Yeah,
Barty.
it'd be like the
Yeah.
racism never ends. It just keeps going.
Yeah. And then like the sequels, you have to like pull out the racism at the root, which is you have to go to their headquarters in the Seaport district. You have to go into the building, drag the CEOs out by the roots of their hair.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Let's make it happen. Maybe next year, if not sooner. Y'all, I want to thank you so much, Agatha, Kiana, Banana, Connie. It was so wonderful to have you on and put this together. It was such a special actual play, honestly. And I know you all felt that too, and that's what I hope we could capture in this conversation. I really think we did. It was such a special presentation. Before you just bonded, as you said, in that way that only people from Chinese diaspora, not only Chinese diaspora, but you get what I'm saying, in the way that Chinese diaspora people can have that same common vibe, and that's what y'all nailed. Do we want to, let's do some outros, please. I'd love to hear your final goodbyes for this evening.
Are we doing the same order?
We'll start with Banana.
Same order.
Thank you so much again for having me. Thank you, Connie, for GMing. Thank you, everyone, for playing. I am Banana. You can find me on social media at BananaChan Games. You can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram. I'm not going to say the third one because I'm trying to get off of it. And my next games that are in development right now are Knockoff, which is the sequel to Forgery, which is a solo horror tabletop role-playing game, and The Darkness at the Brink of Ohio. It's a long title. And yeah, thanks again. I'll pass it over to, I think Agatha's next.
Yes. I've been Agatha. I'm so happy to be here to have this talk about our collective childhood trauma. This was so fun. Be excited to be back on at any time. You can find me online at Mighty Shrimp. Find me on Blue Sky. And then you can also find me on itch.io at Mighty Shrimp with 2 Y's, unfortunately. I think right now all I have on there is Deadly Society, which is an expansion of Good Society, which is a Jane Austen inspired game. It's GM-less and dice-less, and it's very interesting. If you're interested in like narrative structure and like really playing out interpersonal dynamics and drama, you should check that game out. If you're interested in that, but also Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, where everyone dies one by one until there were none, playtest Deadly Society and give me feedback, please. you can download the game for free, the expansion for free right now on my itch.io at Mighty Shrimp. I would love to hear feedback. And then also there's Deathmatch Island, which the Kickstarter has passed, but I'm sure you can jump on like BackerKit later. So, which I'm only writing one island for. Or part of an island for us, so I didn't write that game. But yeah, that's been me. I will pass it on to Kiana.
It's me. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate all these people who are here. We have all been, again, interconnected buds on the internet for a long time, and so being able to be in this one space together is really great. And I look forward to the next time we get to do something like this. But until then, you can find me over literally everywhere as at Kiana S. So that's where you can find my game, that's where you find me on social media. All that stuff is all Kiana S. I've got some stuff in the works for game stuff, including the long-awaited Archon system, which is the system written for our for this previously system agnostic setting book of cyberpunk. It's like, what if we did cyberpunk, but it wasn't full of bigotry, and instead was just full of capitalism is bad. So it's you can check out Archon at Metal Weave Games, and yeah, that's it. That's it for me, and I will pass it over to Connie.
It's a me, Connie. You can find me across the internet at by Connie Chong. My pronouns are they, he, and she. That's BYCONNIECHANG. As I mentioned during the stream, I am the GM and creative producer for Transplanar RPG. Check us out. We just wrapped Arc 1. We're having a hiatus until next year, January 6th, is going to be when we debut Arc 2. So that was a wonderful time to hop in and listen to the Chaos Protocol and catch up. We've got a recap document as well. Outside of that, I am the game designer behind God Killer, which is a 2-person RPG for 1 player, the God Killer, and 1 game master, God. I'm in some exciting talks. Nothing is final yet, but I'm hoping to find a nice publisher, a nice home for the final game to have it in hardcover physical form. So I hope to announce some exciting things about that in the next few months. Fingers crossed for that. And yeah, I'll pass things back over to Mark J.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank y'all so much for tuning in. And if you catch us on the VOD, we'd love if you comment and like and all that kind of good stuff. But once again, I want to thank our cast and our GM. You guys are wonderful. We really appreciate just you being yourselves with this game. I think that's, wow, that stood out the most, is you able to bring so much of yourself to this game. If you like what we're doing here at Apochromatic Unlimited, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/ApochromaticUnlimited. And beyond that, I hope you guys have a safe and wonderful holiday season. Everyone have a good night. Drink water. Tell your friends that you love them. Tell everyone that you love them. And yeah, be well. Bye.
Bye, folks.
I don't have
Bye.
to wave. I don't have to wave because I'm not on camera.